Hello and welcome to OHANA, where no family is left behind and no ancestor is forgotten. This is the show for the upliftment and healing of Ipoku families from the effects of colonialism through talk therapy. It's all about building stronger families, stronger community, and a stronger collective. Hey everybody, this is Calafia Sophia.
And this is Convoy Satori. We want to welcome everybody to OHANA Season 1, which is going to be titled The Curse of Our Ancestors. And this is Episode 1, The Stumbling Block. So, before we get everything kicked off, we're kind of just getting adjusted here for the first podcast. Got the kids down for a nap and everything.
That was tough.
Always, with 4 kids, especially one being 9. But, even just catching word that I'm getting ready to return to work after being off for a month and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was good times. It
was a month vacation.
Yeah, got a chance to kind of shake off a little of that employment trauma, and things of that nature. How work can be kind of stressful, but we were doing a furlough because of the COVID-19 thing, and I was one of the lower rung drivers that had to be off for a month, but get ready to gear up and go back to work as an essential employee. But, before we do so, we wanted to try to get our first episode recorded and things of that nature. But, generally, this show and this season, and what OHANA really is about, as I said in the intro, is going to be about transgenerational trauma. So, just to define real quick what transgenerational trauma is, because, some people may know, a lot of times we call it generational curses, cursing with ancestors and carrying these curses. You hear a lot of that stuff, but what transgenerational trauma is?
It's if we look at Wikipedia and the definition that is outlined, it says transgenerational trauma is trauma that is transferred from the first generation of trauma survivors to the second and further generations of offspring of the survivors via complex post-traumatic stress disorder mechanisms. Now, I looked up what complex post-traumatic stress disorder was, and it was it's a psychological disorder that can develop in response to prolonged, repeated experience of interpersonal trauma in a context in which the individual has little or no chance of escape. Well, that sounds real dire.
That does. It's like escape. Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
So, that, no chance of escape. You're talking prison.
Right.
You're talking how some people feel like they're stuck in relationships.
You're right.
Certain environments where, even work sometimes, where you got to do a crappy job and you feel like you can't go. I wonder if these type of things can lead to, what do you say, no escaping for crying out loud?
I mean, well, even the stay-at-home mom, they maybe have
I dare you to leave your kids.
Right.
And you'll be in prison.
Feel like there's no escape. You're stuck in the house because of how you've been raised to see parenting as being some type of punishment or something.
I mean, nowadays you even have to worry about your own neighborhood because people like trying to call if they don't see a sense of normative behavior, being that you put your kids on a bus and stuff like that. More power to you. You do your own thing with your children. But if you want to sacrifice to homeschool your kids, a lot of times you even worry about your own neighbors calling on you and stuff like that.
And this whole no chance of escape, well, we don't believe that. So, but
what was the one word it used? Interpersonal experience of interpersonal trauma. In a context in which the individual has little or no chance of escape. Jeez. See, and this kind of relative to how a lot of times you hear with transgenerational trauma, of which was by Dr. Rachel Yehuda. It was the one who actually did the scientific study of it. I know a lot of ancestral elders speak so many times on how there's memory in our DNA.
Yes.
And a lot of religious colonialistic spiritual pathologies talked about how our ancestors are always with us and how we can pray and connect with our loved ones and things of that nature, but on how there's this eternal memory that's within us. And it was Rachel Yehuda who did the study and actually discovered how this really works, and that's where the birth of the new discipline, even at some levels that it be accepted, is transgenerational trauma. One of the requisites was PTSD, and even because that's a growing field within itself, post traumatic
Stress disorder.
post traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
That itself is kind of an infant and still being developed.
Yeah, well, they actually started off with just calling that shell shock.
Right, from war.
That they didn't recognize it as being a continual pattern. It was just basically, like you said, in war, they just had the shell opened up, causing an explosion, and now you're just in shock and you're just dealing with trauma.
So a lot of times, when soldiers came back and stuff like that, it wasn't PTSD. It's like, oh, he's just experienced shell shock.
Shell shock, and then they came out with PTSD, and then even people with sexual assault or different things, they only more recently have been getting tied in with PTSD as it being more of a broad term instead of just war.
And I think one of the things that differs PTSD from just going through regular stress, because we all kind of go through shit and go through stuff, but these extreme stress levels and things of that nature, to not get it confused with PTSD is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's based on the symptoms and the level of the symptoms occurring over a long period of time, months even, and that's how it's able to be diagnosed on how whether or not you're suffering from PTSD. And it's this suffrage at PTSD, what Yehuda found. The concept is called epigenetics. And she said how and molecular biology did investigations and found that the intergenerational transmission of trauma was happening through epigenetic mechanisms. Now, epigenetics is the study of mechanisms that modify gene expression, thus shaping, as she's putting in her study, phenotypic outcome, but do not alter the underlying DNA sequence. A sure way to put it is epigenetics is kind of like the environment getting under your skin and facilitating or suppressing the expression of genes, which are themselves fixed and immutable. So one of the terms in there was phenotypic. What phenotypic is basically how your genes, the genotype, how your genes making up through your DNA is in relation to the environment that you're in, the carrier is in, and the behaviors that they may emit. So gene expression is another way of saying the same thing, kind of just summing it up with phenotypic outcome. And epigenetics has a direct effect with gene expression. So, in other words, daddy was shell-shocked from the war, or PTSD, and now daddy has these certain behaviors, and because of the trauma, it's fused in to his very gene expression and storing with the epigenetics. Now the whole thing is like, okay, that happened to daddy. What does this have on the kids? What does this have to do with the family?
Yeah, when you have kids that are literally watching their parents, most of the time we don't understand the fact that our children imitate and put off what they are shown by their main two influences, which is mom and dad. So now dad is coming back home from the war, like you said, and they are trying to, how they deal with anger. Now they're dealing with anger that same way. If they're, this is where you may get different alcoholism, yelling, cursing. These are things that they've watched their mom or dad, experience, and now are them experiencing this from mom or dad, and now they're, this is being passed down, this behavior. So thinking that this is the way that we deal with anger.
And of course, this child comes out into the community. Let's say if you do have your kids in public school, now you have to worry about this child and or multiple children who are carrying this same, I guess, behavior
Yeah.
that's instilled in the child through the epigenetics or whatnot within his household. And now these behaviors, these phenotypic gene expression behaviors are in the school. And now your kid, comes home bringing this into the household, and it's now something you guys have to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, man, a struggling, challenging thing for parents today.
Well, and if you think about it, they say how bullies are made.
They're taught, yeah.
They're taught that how their parents deal with them in the darkness, what we don't see, how they're yelled at or picked at home by their parents, and now they bring that same behavior because they think this is how we do problem solving. And then their parents probably had the same issue with their grandparents, to them. So it just continues to kind of keep this cycle going constantly. And so then, like you said, now they're going to school now doing this type of behavior, and they think nothing's wrong with it because their parents, their main influencers, are showing them this is how we deal with problems and this is how we get people to do what we want them to.
Yeah, and I think, man, it's a sneaky fight, kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you try to just think like this little bastard of a child treating my child like this, and it's like, we blame the kids so much.
Yeah.
But it's like so many times it comes down to the responsibility of the parent, and the parent wants to try to pass the buck a lot to certain institutions, but at the end of the day, you place your child in the responsibility of that institutionalized environment, and I think that's where the difference, like it even said in the definition with epigenetics, the intergenerational transmission, that a lot of times when you hear about people talking about transgenerational trauma, they will even present it. I think it was a TED Talks that was talking about, gene expression and how the genes follow through, how it was something she had to deal with low self-esteem and stuff. But she's seen this from her grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor. And she had issues with her self-esteem, and it would come down to them by the way she would over-criticize them. And they almost couldn't do nothing right because she was passing this ideal of herself down through to the children, and it kind of skipped over the parents and came out through the child. And she could never, although her parents didn't produce this within a intergenerational and setting, it was still something she had within her, and she discovered it through her grandmother. Right. From the trauma she went through, the oppressive, with her own behaviors and stuff, being a prisoner and things of that nature through the Holocaust. It was something she had to deal with when she was released, and just that difference between the trans and the intergenerational aspect is where the battle of the argument of nature and nurture takes place. How it's about the household and how they're brought up. Oh, it's about the environment made me this way. Oh, my environment made me that way. Well, the study kind of shows how it's a balance of both.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And that balance where the nature, where the focus on the nurturing is actually within the household. And that's where the intergenerational aspect really lies. But like I said, the sneaky fangy devil, even within that situation, as the lady, I wish I could remember her name for the TED Talks, as she mapped out that she still, even though the intergenerational setting was awesome with her parents, that is, she still had a transgenerational issue. Yeah. How could this take place? And and that's where we've really got to sit down and talk about how this is a deeper issue, and it's within the reproduction. We're talking about the very carrying of a gene, and that's what the essence of epigenetics is how this gene is something that's being passed along through, I think it's called gametes. The gametes, which is how one DNA structure attaches to another DNA structure of an opposite sex, and therefore we're creating a baby.
Right.
And so within this reproduction, now the epigenetic is flowed down. The gene from this one parent mixing with the other parent flows into the child.
So now you just got compounded issues.
Exactly. So mom and dad wants a better life for the kid. They actually provided for the kid, but dad's carrying this
traumatic background from his war-torn father.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now,
mom has self-esteem issues, and then so just mix it all up, and then this is what you get. And it's like, this is what our kids are like, a awesome reflection for us to be able to kind of, this is why, how our kids kind of trigger these things in us. Now we see that low self-esteem. Now we see this, the aspects of our childhood in our own kids, and it's giving us an opportunity to really kind of make different decisions, different choices, but it comes with us first being able to recognize it. So without recognizing it, we're not going to be able to make the changes, like you said, the nature versus nurture. We're not going to be able to nurture these aspects within our kids and help them heal them, along with us healing it, if we're not, paying attention to it and giving it the proper the proper look-see of what we need to be working on. And this is how it becomes the stumbling block, which is we're going to constantly keep tripping over this same aspect of these same ways of dealing with things that our ancestors, our parents have kind of interwoven into us, is because we have to really take an active role in removing the stumbling block. So by recognizing the different triggers and how they affect us, and then making these safe spaces in our marriage and relationships in order to make mistakes, we really have to work on checking our reactions to our loved ones, and then also using our reactions to trace the trauma back to the source, which more than likely the source is childhood.
Yeah. And I think that is a challenge, man. Because it's like, just to pay attention to triggers. So many people hear triggers and it's like, dude, I'm not an addict.
Right. We're not talking about you doing a line of coke.
I don't do coke.
But we are. But we're not just talking about you doing cocaine or going on drinking bingers. Those, are just the effects, which we'll talk about in other episodes. But just the whole thing is that these are effects that we have gotten. We didn't just get this from nowhere.
Right.
We got this from that transgenerational and intergenerational trauma, and how to deal with the trauma is more so, and how the issue that we're needing to examine.
And I think that's another discussion also, is just trying to understand just the nature of addictions, on how certain behaviors do just have a natural occurrence, and to respect that, it's everywhere. The idea and nature of an addiction, it doesn't have to be just isolated to one horrible experience or behavior, if you will. That we have many forms of addictions. So just, I guess, responding to the whole, oh man, you talking about we got to go through triggers. I don't have a problem. Well, we technically all do.
Well, if you've ever gotten upset, if something somebody has said has made you really sad, and they're saying, it probably wasn't as huge of a deal, but it probably triggered something there is a source situation somewhere within your childhood that has started a ripple. Like, you have to think of the trauma as like the pebble that gets thrown into the pond, and then you see the ripples just radiate from where the pebble hit the water. And those ripples that we're seeing are the different situations in which we are triggered, and we have this response to that source trauma. So, it's all triggers can be traced back to something. And even if that source is basically when our parents reacted a certain way towards us, that was the start of the transmission in the very, home environment. So it's like everything has a source, but it's up to us to kind of look back and be able to find it if we're looking to.
No, and that's kind of funny because how many times have people now coming to be adults, having kids, and then you kind of snap off on your kids to regulate some wild behavior or what have you. Mm-hmm. But then when it's quiet and the dust settles, you're kind of standing there feeling like crap, feeling like shit, and you kind of utter the words, "Oh my God, I just felt like my dad just now.
God, I sounded
oh
like
my
my
God,
mom."
I sound like my mom."
We've done it plenty of times,
and it's like that embroidered behaviors and what you went through from your childhood. You really don't tap into those little sneaky pockets until you get into these unknown situations, and then you just automatically naturally pull from them. And these are those sneaky little addictions of life and behaviors. And now, you're raising a hand to your child and you're like, holy crap, I swore as a father, I swore as a parent I wasn't going to beat my kids.
I wasn't going to be that.
I wasn't going to be that parent, but I just smacked my child. I just raised my hand to my child. I almost went and got a belt, like.
And you don't want to talk about it to anyone because then it's like
you're embarrassed.
You're embarrassed, and they want to make you. They want to judge, and like they've never been there before. And our kids don't want to push our buttons because, like you were saying, they are half of our trauma.
Big time.
They carry our awesomeness and they carry some of the trauma that we have gotten from our parents. And now they're compounded because it's you and your significant other or baby daddy, whatever. So just because you ain't your baby daddy, you still...
That's a big one, man. So
just
because... see, there goes that nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
So just because you change the environment of the child away from Bruce, and now you have him around Timothy,
Big B.
you got him away from Big B and got him around good old Timothy, and you think things are going to be better now. No. Little Jonathan still has little Jonathan still has Big Bruce in him. I don't care how much Timothy gives him good love, and provides this better environment. Your child is acting off of the gametes and the epigenetics and stored in him from Big Bruce.
Right. That's still Big B, baby.
And don't forget, you've mother have chosen to change the intragenerational transmission environment.
Yes.
This nature nurture juggling act that we all subscribe to, and now you switched it up. You changed the environment now to be with Timothy than Big Bruce, but you already created the initial environment with Big Bruce.
Yeah.
So we just have to, like, for real, start consciously waking up and seeing how deeply seated this stuff can actually go, man.
Well, and I think that's why what we're looking to do is to take the, as holistic counselors, is to have the perspective that we're looking to heal, the spirit, body, and the mind. Because that's how deep it goes. It goes to a very coming down from your spiritual connection to how you mentally see the world, and then even to the body sign triggers. Talk to many people with PTSD that there are certain smells, certain physical, reactions that they may have when it comes to, dealing with any type of trigger that comes up. And, even with the child, you have a tick that you don't even necessarily know about. These are where ticks and stuff like that, come from. And that we have to really accept that transgenerational trauma, really does play a role in our reactions and perceptions and, how we engage that fight or flight mechanism. This is, some of my stuff with PTSD, I've thrown wine glasses and, back and, before I started actually dealing with it, but we're we have to accept the fact that, this is the source that we need to start from. And by healing these trauma, by actually dealing with it, taking it out of the shadow.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like, I remember, just when I came to light to it, I don't really flow with a whole lot of the gene test stuff, as it's been criticized as a shabby science and just making billions off people's ignorance of it. But I would love to have my DNA examined for what they said they discovered as a war gene.
Yeah, like the warrior gene.
Yeah, and it's just like, that's interesting to me because that's some of the stuff that I had to come to light to, like, man, why am I getting so angry? Like, I'm ready to really fuck something up.
Yeah.
I'm ready to really go in on these dudes or on the situation, but you know, they're kind of upset. Yeah. Me, I am pissed off. What is it called? The warrior gene?
Yeah, the warrior gene. It's like a variation in the X chromosome gene, which is the feminine. It's the MAOA, an enzyme that affects the neurotransmitters dopamine. I can't even. I'm not even.
Yeah, what is that? Riboflavin.
Something, and serotonin. I do know that.
Serotonin,
right? So, basically,
that's crazy, man. So this, I'm saying, they know this deep science and stuff because my father was a Vietnam vet.
Yeah,
and I misunderstood a lot of the stories. Because, you know, when I was younger, he only told me so many stories that were relative to my age. So he'll tell me stuff like I have to think for myself. You know, you got to have a believe in God and have your own spiritual connection. You got to think for yourself. And if you get an order, you got to be able to say no. Right. And it was so many times he told me these same stories about how he said no and, you know, consequently got his butt kicked. But now, hindsight looking back during that time in my age, he was trying to facilitate his son to not get in trouble, follow the rules, stuff like that. But at the same time, think for yourself. Don't follow these groups out here on the street. These other guys that want to do this and get into that. Think for yourself. Say no. You know, and if you end up having to get into a fight because of it, whatever. Well, I got older. And I got more stories. Only to find out that he actually received an award for single-hand combat. Like, and they only give this award to a single soldier for hand-to-hand combat. And I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, what? This isn't none of what you told me. And he was talking about, what was that you said you learned in school? When they I said it was a part in the Vietnam War, and he mentioned it in telling the story when he said at one time all the American bases were raided at the same time.
Wow.
And he was like, it was horrible. But he does not, you know, PTSD, remember the actual event when he got the award, but he thinks it may be this time.
Just in it.
No,
warrior.
Because he said they were dropped off like in the mountains and basically had to get to the base, only to finally get to the base, and the base is going through this huge attack, and this is happening all across Vietnam at one time. Wow. He says, son, my greatest fear was not having enough bullets. Man, that hit me in my stomach. Like, what?
Like you were there and know the fear.
It's like I can see him, like I'm riding the gene back up, and I'm in Vietnam now, and it's hot as hell, and I'm looking and counting, okay, I got 1,000 bullets, I need another 1,000. You know, like I felt what he was saying, and he's telling the story.
Yeah.
And he's like, I had 2. What did they have? M16s? I had 2 M16s. And was running both them motherfuckers, as he put it.
Yeah, he has no filter.
No, Jerry Leverson has no filter. Jerry Leverson Jr. was born without a filter, and when the filter was presented, he denied it. But he said he had both guns running hot, that the tips of them were red hot, and was just running them. And I was just like, damn, Dad, you mean like Rambo? And he just started busting up laughing. Yeah, son, like Rambo. So it was just amazing to me, man, that now I can kind of understand where this internal energy comes from, where I'm just ready, like, for war.
Yeah.
It's like I'm ready for Vietnam capable war. And where is this coming from? My parents, they were, middle working class, this and that. I didn't grow up with dead people everywhere. We grew up in a sort of tough environment, stuff like that. But at the same token, why am I ready to tear it all down? And having to transfer this into football, a lot of times, I was great. I was good at it. And a lot of people didn't even understand that, Like, man, Gerard just has this good knack for football. No, I have a good knack for war. And I think that's why, the creator never really led me to being able to serve, because I think I would have just become fully occupied in it. But
well, and I think that it's when you look at how the story was written, it's like that gene has already been expressed. And you're now at the point where it's time for you to help. It's not about war. You did the war, it's been in your lineage. Now it's time about finding that balance. Like we said, the whole healing, that transgenerational trauma, that wasn't his path, but it's yours. And we all have that. So
it's like our gene has expressed this during this existence down here in the 3D.
Exactly. So it's like now, this is why people are saying it's our responsibility now to take these different experiences that our ancestors have had and transmute them into a higher sense of consciousness. It's not about, my parents were this way, so I'm going to continue to. No, it's about us taking that, and now it's time for us to take the lesson from it, the karma from it, take the lesson from it, and then transmute it into something that actually helps propel us towards a higher sense of consciousness. They say this is the fourth world, in a sense of this world complete. So our ancestors, we've all the different expressions that we could have had has been happening. Now, as the descendants of our ancestors, is our time to now examine, see where these different things are popping up, and start transmuting it for a higher sense of being. That's the best way that we can honor our parents, grandparents, and all the ancestors that came before them.
I think there's no better way but to end on that note. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up for this show. Again, this is just episode 1, and this is for the entire season, which is we're going to be discussing this ideals of transgenerational trauma and its many fashions, and this is just curse of our ancestors, and sort of this is the curse that we're all carrying. That's how deep it's going, and this was just the first show talking about the stumbling block, transgenerational trauma itself. So, thanks you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Again, this is OHANA, where no family is left behind and
no ancestor is forgotten.
Take you guys later. Love you. Thank you for connecting with us this episode. You've taken the time to heal our collective alongside other families all around the world. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are grateful the Creator led you to ours.
If you would like to check out the articles and research that we discussed on today's show, please feel free to check out our Facebook page at OHANA Means Family. And also, make sure you subscribe to OHANA so you don't miss any healing topics discussed this season and the seasons to come.
Until next time, family, balance, love, light above all. We are OHANA.